Located just 17 miles south of Atlanta, Jonesboro, Georgia is a cozy, small community alternative to big city life.
Jonesboro is the county seat of Clayton County, and Clayton County is one of the 5 metro counties for Atlanta. Jonesboro itself is kind of a small town, even though it is part of metro Atlanta.
And after Sheila dates and her husband divorce, she and her daughter Regina leave Chicago and decide to make Jonesboro their home.
My ex-husband and I did not have a good relationship because he was the unfaithful area. It was better for me to move back to an area where I was familiar with, and that the cost of living was not as great as it was in Chicago. So I decided to move back to the South where the living was easy and it wasn't as expensive.
Thank you. CC's check cashing.
Hi, Mom. Do you have a minute?
Of course, baby. What is it?
Regina was my best friend. We were like 2 peas in a pod.
I just got my bonus check. We should go out for dinner.
Congratulations. Yeah, baby, dinner sounds great. I tell you what, I'm just finishing up here and then I'll meet you at home.
I'll see you soon.
Bye, Mom.
All right, love you.
It was just the 2 of us that was living there at the time. She wanted to stay home with me because she felt that we would have more fun doing things together, the 2 of us, because we just enjoyed each other's company.
After a long day at work, Sheila and Regina get ready to hit the town together.
The night out's on me tonight. Hey, those are my shoes.
Well, hey, I'm wearing them tonight.
They fit you better, actually.
Yeah.
Now I have to get dressed up, too.
Yeah, you do. We're celebrating your success.
Regina and I love to go out and have fun together and celebrate, whether it be a birthday, whether it be a promotion, whatever it was that needed celebrating, we could help you celebrate.
Sheila and Regina head to a local spot for drinks and dancing.
But seriously, though, what is the name of that new dance everybody's doing? What the Jell-O?
Oh, my gosh. Mom.
It's crazy. You guys are just shaking all over the place. Man.
And we went to the health club together. Shopping was one of our favorite things to do as well. And we did like to dance a lot.
Hello, can we have 2 vodka tonics with lime, please?
And I'll take the check. What? I told you I was taking you out for once.
Look, you said you were paying for dinner, not the drinks. You should save your money.
I want to.
Regina had this beautiful smile and this big heart. It just made her feel so good to be able to do something for her mother. Because most of the time, whenever we went out, I would always pay. But this time she said, I got it.
To my little girl, all grown up.
To my mom, the strongest woman I know. Love this song.
First time here?
No, actually, we come here quite often.
Haha, I don't believe that. I'd remember you.
We got hit on a lot. I like flirting. But Regina, she didn't know how to naturally do that.
That's sweet of you to say.
How about you? Come dance with me.
No thanks. I'm out celebrating with my mom tonight.
Oh, well, we'll find her someone to dance with then.
Look, we're just catching our breath from the dance floor, not trying to be rude or anything.
I can't let you slip through my fingers. Come on, one song.
Actually, I think I'm done dancing.
Yeah, I'm right with you.
It's just starting to drizzle.
But as Sheila and Regina call it a night, someone else isn't far behind.
Oh, it is really starting to come down out here.
I swear he's following us, Mom.
He's being paranoid. Oh, look, lights on again.
The oil was low in the car, but we didn't have much oil.
Can you pass me the oil?
It's almost empty.
Yeah, I know, but it's enough for now. I'll pick up some more soon. All right, it's a good thing we have these umbrellas, huh?
Ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
You know what? I'm gonna write you a note so you don't forget and end up getting stranded out here.
Thank you. Look, I was gonna get some, I just didn't have time. Home?
Yes, please. I am so ready to relax.
After years of working as a flight attendant, Sheila takes a job that keeps her feet firmly on the ground.
At the time, I was working with a check cashing company. I was there most of the time because I was the manager.
But at times, Sheila's job lands her in some risky situations.
The sign says 9 o'clock. Thank you for showing up.
I'm sorry, sir. It'll just take you a
You
second.
guys ripped me off, and I want my money. All right? You charged me $10 to cash a little check. Went down the street at Super Center, they charged me $3 for the same thing.
Most of the people that cashed their checks at the check cashing store were people that did not have bank accounts. So they would come there and pay a fee, a hefty fee, to have their checks cashed. That annoyed some people.
Okay. I apologize. I'm not sure what policies Super Center has, but I can assure you that we do post all of our fees
Are
so
you
that you
calling
can
me a liar? You calling me a liar?
No. I'm not calling you a liar, okay? But
I want my money! I want my money.
if your check was cashed, I can't do that.
You people have no idea what you're doing with.
As Sheila arrives home that evening, she gets a message from her daughter Regina.
Hi, Mom, it's me. I'm gonna be home late tonight. Don't wait on me for dinner. Oh, and let me know if you need me to pick up oil on the way home. Love you.
The oil. All right, I'll just have to get some in the morning.
Hi, Mom. What are you doing in the dark?
Girl, I wasn't expecting you. I just got your message.
Yeah, well, Louis let me go early after I turned down his offer to work over dinner. Yeah, he's such a creep.
Yeah. Well, listen, I was just about to pop in a microwave dinner, but I can wrestle us up some pasta if you want some.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, this is Sheila Dates.
I donate to a lot of charities, and I get a lot of phone calls from those charities to see if I'm still donating that particular year. So when I received a call from the Fraternal Order of Police about my donation that year, I verified my name, my address, and the amount of donation that I would be donating to the charity.
Yes, that information is correct. If you could just mail me a receipt, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks.
Your bleeding heart makes you an easy target, Mom.
Hey, it's for a good cause. Plus, you never want to turn down a good opportunity for karma, right?
Nothing would have been strange about that phone call at all to me.
The next day, it seems like it's business as usual for Sheila.
I never had to drop off any money or take any money to the bank or handle the money. Someone always came and picked up the money and took it where it needed to go. Most of the time, I felt pretty safe.
But as Sheila heads home for the night, she's unaware that someone is keeping track of her every move. And it's only a matter of time before evil comes calling.
They did 3 days of surveillance on her. Sheila seemed like a good target.
"48-year-old Sheila Dates is being watched. She just doesn't know it.
I think they watched her for 3 days, checking her routine and to see who may or may not be at the house with her.
And even though it appears like another ordinary day to Sheila, appearances can be deceiving.
Sandy, you scared me.
I find I have that effect more and more the older I get.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I only had one other person working there with me, and she worked only on the days when I was not there. So I was mainly the only person working in that store.
Listen, I know why you're here. If you can watch the front for me, I'll be right back with your check. Sure. All right.
They had a good security system. It's 2 separate codes, one to get in the door, and then another one to take the alarm off of the safe so that the safe would open. In the safe, there was anywhere between 10 to 20,000, depending upon how many checks we cashed that day or how much MoneyGram we got.
All right, here you go. Ooh, payday is the best day of the week.
You know I can cash that for you.
That joke never gets old. Speaking of payday, any word on Elaine?
Only that she went back to California.
About April or May, a robbery actually took place at the store where one of the other employees was involved. Some money was taken when she was working, and she said when she was working that particular day that someone came in and took a clothes hanger and put it through the window and slid the money bag that she had just counted with all the money in it and walked out the store with it, was her story. I wasn't told how much it was, but I didn't believe it, but there was nothing I could do because I wasn't there. And I thought that she had something to do with it, but I couldn't prove it. Shortly after that, she just quit. Well, she just stopped working for the company. But no one told me about any investigation because, like I said, I was just a manager. My supervisor knew. He knew, but I didn't know anything, and he didn't tell me anything other than that the store had been robbed. He didn't give me any details.
I wonder if the FBI is going to get involved.
Who knows? I'll tell you one thing, though. If I stole some money, I'd be laid up in the Ritz somewhere, not some Los Angeles suburb.
Take care, Sheila.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.
But the next morning, Sheila's world is completely turned upside down.
Regina, can you get the door?
The morning of August 31st, 1999 is a morning that I'll never forget.
Can I help you?
Hi, I'm Agent Weber. This is Agent Bailey. We're here to see Sheila Dates.
Mom, it's for you.
Her exact words were, "There's 2 FBI agents at the door and they want to talk to you." And I see a man standing at my door with a badge saying FBI.
Sheila Dates? Manager of CC's Check Cash and Store in Marietta?
Yes. Is there a problem?
When they said FBI, the first thought that comes through my mind is the robbery of the store that had happened a couple of months back. And because I was the manager of the store, they were coming to my house to get my statement.
What's it about, Mom?
It must be about Elaine.
May we come in?
Sure. Right this way. Can we get you some coffee, water, tea?
And the next thing I know, I see a gun, and a gun is pointed at me.
I don't understand.
We want the money. And if the 2 of you cooperate, you'll live. If not, you'll both be going out in body bags, you understand?
I froze. I just couldn't imagine what he was talking about. I didn't have any money. I was confused.
Do you understand? All right, let's go. Back here. Let's go.
Now. It was like my heart stopped because I had never really seen the barrel of a gun before in my life. I was scared. Not only was I frightened, I felt helpless, and I've never felt helpless before.
And Sheila quickly learns that these 2 FBI imposters mean business.
We've been watching you for quite some time. We know you got enough money to set us straight. So why don't you just tell us how to open the safe?
What safe?
At your job.
He wasn't coming to rob me. He was coming to get the money from the store. That was their plan.
There are 3 doors, and you need a specific key, and then they'll call me to verify. The verification code is 100602. There'll be a clicking noise so before you punch in that 133, and then after that clicks, then you punch in code. It's going to be 2508. And once you punch that in, then you'll just have to press in 133 star. And then after that.
Sit down. Sit down. Just sit down. Sit.
Don't move. Come on. The female was going to go in the store like she was the manager of the store and get the money out of the safe herself. But because it was such a complicated process, she couldn't do it. And she let him know she could not do it. So that's when their plans were switched.
So we're gonna have to improvise. You take Sheila and I'll stay here with Regina. And if any funny business happen, you call me. I'll put a bullet in her head, right? And then look, we've been over this. Look, you just get the money, okay? Just get the money.
Baby, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Shut up. Here's how it's going down. You're gonna take a ride with my lady and get that money. I'm gonna stay here with your daughter and make sure that you do what you're supposed to do. Do you understand? If you try anything funny, I will put this gun down her throat and pull the trigger. Do you understand that?
Yes, 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 yes.
Let's go. Get up! Let's go.
And I looked back at Regina. I just looked in her eyes. I couldn't say anything, but the look that I gave her was, I love you. And the look that she gave me was, I love you.
You're driving. Don't try any funny stuff because I'm packing.
I was supposed to get oil this morning. We'll have to stop on the way.
It's not part of the plan.
I'm sorry, it's not a trick.
I tell her, we're not gonna make it because my oil light is on. I need to stop and put some oil in this car. If not, it's gonna break down.
You want to make it to the money, right? I want my daughter back. I know what's at stake.
Fine. Get in the car.
I can never describe that feeling, ever. I don't think there's even words that can describe that feeling. I needed to cooperate, or they were gonna kill my daughter.
Get in the car!
After two unidentified accomplices take Sheila Dates and her daughter Regina hostage by gunpoint, Sheila has no choice but to surrender to their plan to rob the safe at her workplace. But on the way there, car trouble forces a quick detour.
Don't try anything, okay? Let's go.
As I'm at the gas station getting the oil, she's looking at my every move because she's standing right next to me. So, only thing I can do is just try to look like I'm helpless or I need some help.
Can I help you ladies find anything?
Just need some oil.
Right down there.
I'm looking with as much desperation in my eyes, help me as I can. But at that time of the morning, nobody's really paying attention.
How you ladies doing?
We're fine, thanks. How much is it?
$8.62.
Here you go. You can keep the change. Thank you. Walk faster.
We put the oil in the car and we were on our way. I felt like if I had jumped out the car, I would have been jeopardizing my daughter's life. Anything that I would have tried to do to save me would have hurt her. And that's what was going on in my mind. Don't do nothing to put your daughter's life at risk.
I mean, he told Sheila that, I'm gonna stay here with your daughter. You're gonna make sure she gets into the safe. And if you don't get the money for us, I'm gonna kill your daughter. So, Sheila had that threat, hanging over her. And she wanted to cooperate, do everything she could, to save her daughter.
Back at their house, Regina's life remains on the line, and her captor is growing more impatient by the minute.
Speed up on now.
But when Sheila and her assailant arrive at the cash-checking store, there's another big problem waiting for them.
Okay, come on. What?
You have to wait 30 minutes so the night alarm doesn't go off.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
If we go in before 9, the alarm will go off.
You should have said this before we left.
So we had to sit there in the parking lot and wait until time that I could go into the store without the alarm automatically going off.
What's taking so long?
We have to wait until it opens.
You believe her?
I don't know. That's what she said.
Hey, look, just keep you cool. I got everything locked down here. Just stick to the plan and call me when you're done. Things are not looking too good for you right now. You better pray your mother keeps her word.
As the clock strikes 9 a.m., Sheila leads her kidnapper into the store.
The security system had the man-trap door, and once the door closes, it lets you know how many people went through there. And it locks the safe if 2 people walk through that door at the same time to let them know that something was wrong. Because normally it's only supposed to be 1 person there at a time.
Hurry up, what's taking so long?
It's not working.
Sheila, come on, you're doing this on purpose.
The only way I can get this safe to open is to call the alarm company. They're the only ones who can open it.
Really? All right, whatever. Just do it.
This is Pam with security.
Hi, this is Sheila Dates over at store 285, and I'm having trouble opening my safe.
So when I called the alarm system and told them that I needed them to unlock the safe, that was a clue to let them know that something was wrong. They should have said, "Are you okay?" That's the only thing they should have said, "Are you okay?" But they didn't pay that any attention.
Just reset the PIN code and punch in your code again. Then call me back if it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you.
Hurry up, somebody's here.
I'm doing the best I can. It's not opening.
Look, go tell them we're closed and get back here. Go.
Customers are coming up to the store because it's after 9 o'clock now.
We're closed.
And I'm saying, go to another store. I kept saying, my store is closed.
And Sheila knows she's running out of time.
Come on, you've got 5 minutes.
Get the money and get the hell out of there.
I'm only thinking about my daughter. Just give them what they want so we can go back to the house and she gonna be fine. And that's exactly what they led me to believe. Once they got the money, they was gonna let us both go. But I know that criminal minds have criminal minds. They don't think like me. And I don't think like them.
Sheila, come on, what is the problem?
Let me call security.
Again?
While we're inside the store and I can't get into the safe, oh, that was nerve-wracking.
This is Pam with security.
Pam, this is Sheila again. I'm still having trouble opening the safe.
Okay, let me see what I can do from here.
Unaware there's a robbery in progress, The security company unlocks the safe remotely.
Thank you. We're in. All right. Fill that up. Please, can you just let me talk to Regina first? Let me know she's okay.
Sheila, you know it's not going down like
Please,
that.
just let me talk. Oh, your bag!
I started taking the money out, putting it in whatever bag that she wanted. I took all the cash, all the coins. That totaled about $16,000. I'm still trying to do what I need to do to make sure my daughter is alive.
Hurry up, Sheila, hurry up. Get on the floor. Turn around. That's all we have, I swear. I did what you asked. Down to the floor.
She told me to get down on the floor, and she got on my back, and she's got the cord, and she just started to strangle me. And she wasn't gonna stop. And she just left me there on the floor for dead.
Now that the robbery is over and Sheila is presumed dead, there's only one thing left to do.
Your mama did good.
I was out cold on the floor for a period of time. When I came to, I struggled to the phone. I called 911.
This is an emergency.
I think they killed my daughter.
I couldn't say anything else, but I think they killed my daughter.
Paramedics arrive at the store and rush Sheila to the hospital. And when police descend on Sheila's house, they discover Regina's tragic fate.
Regina was found tied up in an upstairs bedroom. She had been strangled. I met Sheila at the hospital. Making a death notification is about the hardest thing you have to do, and especially if it's a child. It's terrible.
Any word about my daughter?
I kept asking them about my daughter. They wouldn't tell me nothing. They just kept avoiding the question.
Miss Dates? I'm Detective Sprazza. I am so sorry to tell you that we did find Regina's body inside the house. She was deceased.
I had no emotion. I had no feelings. I was numb. I was just numb. And I think because I loved her so much, I wanted to do what I could not only to make her proud of me, but I wanted to do whatever I could so that they wouldn't take another life.
Sheila provides police with crucial information about the unidentified woman who left her for dead and the man who murdered Regina in cold blood.
We sat down with Sheila, and Sheila described the two suspects, and we did sketches.
So his hair was kind of like a cross between like a mohawk and buzz cut, just like that.
That's one thing about me. I am a detailed person. I remember everything. Everything. What she looked like and what he looked like. And I was determined that they were going to get him.
So I got up and I went downstairs and I said, "Who is it?" And I said, "The FBI." I said, "What do you want?" He said, "We want to investigate you concerning the company you worked for, Ace." And he had the badge up, saying he was the FBI.
What did the badge look like?
It was a silver badge like yours, bigger than.
Was it gold or was it silver?
Gold.
She provided the suspect descriptions and the description of the cars and the fact that they were talking to each other on cell phones throughout the crime. Was she on the cell phone or was she on your phone?
She was on the cell phone. She made all her calls from the cell phone. It was during the time I couldn't get the safe open. And she was on the phone to him, relating to him.
They're having trouble with the safe.
They're calling for the safe. She's telling him everything that I'm telling her that they're telling me.
And the cell phones turn out to be the smoking gun that police need to identify their suspects.
So when I got the information on the cell phones, we figured out what cell phone towers they were using. And we went through all those phone calls on those towers during that time frame, finding two cell phones that were talking to each other. The tech from the cell phone company told me these were prepaid cell phones, but they did buy them from this particular location. It was just a small cell phone shop. We were able to find out that Keith Henry was the name that was on the cell phone. Keith did have a criminal history. He did do time for armed robbery previously. Once I had that information, wrote a search warrant, went to their house, and that's when I walked in and saw the picture of Melinda. She looks exactly like the sketch. And, oh, his picture looks like the sketch that we have. And I'm like, these are the people.
So their names are Keith and Belinda Henry. They're a married couple. They recently robbed a bank in Nashville. We're tracking them right now with their cell phones. Closing in, Sheila.
By this time, I'm just hoping that they catch them before they hurt anybody else.
If they hadn't been identified, they would have just kept going, whatever it took.
But 6 weeks later, their crimes catch up to them.
The FBI calls. It's like, hey, we got him in a hotel room, up here in New Jersey. We're getting ready to take him down.
Keith and Belinda Henry, come out with your hands up.
Linda. It's time to go.
I'll be right behind you, okay?
Keith had come out to give himself up.
Where's Belinda, Keith?
And as he's coming out, they heard a gunshot. Belinda stayed behind and shot herself. I guess couldn't deal with what the consequences were going to be. I think she just couldn't face the thought of going to prison and, everything that came with it.
Keith Henry is arrested on charges of robbery, kidnapping, and murder.
Never forget that night. I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget that feeling because it was wonderful. Detective Sperezzo called me and he said, "We got him." And it was like, wow, it was just such a relief off of me.
At the police station, Keith waives his rights and spills the whole ugly truth.
I didn't expect Keith to talk to me, and I don't remember exactly what I said to him, but there's always a point when you can tell, like sometimes their head will drop or there's just a difference in their demeanor, and you're like, wow, he's gonna talk. And he goes, all right, I'll tell you.
I was just sick and tired of not having the things I wanted. We never had enough money. So I said, baby, let's get us some money. Disappear. Live the good life. So we came up with this plan to rob a check cashing store. They should keep enough money on hand, right? Well, we watched a few stores around Atlanta, Found the ones that was mostly managed by women. Picked out 4 of them. We were gonna rob them all.
And from what I understand now, when I received a call from the Fraternal Order of Police, that is how they found out where I live in order to follow me from my job to my home to see that there were no dogs, no husbands, no live-in boyfriends existed at my house. And that's when they decided to go ahead and come and pose as FBI agents to commit a crime.
We watched that lady for days. Figured out that she didn't have a man in her life. No dogs. So we decided to take her hostage. Figure out how to get into the store, get into the safe. Linda would act as the manager. That didn't work out.
Keith admitted to everything. Keith said the original plan was to kill both Sheila and Regina, so there wouldn't be any witnesses. And if that had been the case, I don't know that the case would have ever been solved. So the fact that Sheila survived and was able to give the information that she did give is what led to this case being resolved. From what Keith told me, they would have just kept going with this as long as they could. Spend the money, get more money. Spend the money, get more money. Just enjoy life, have a good time. Just buying things, going places, jewelry, nice clothes, being somebody, I guess, in their eyes. But at the end of the interview, I asked him, I said, I'm done with my question. Do you have any questions of me? And he made a statement to the effect, he says, well, my wife's gone. I was too much of a coward to do it. So can I get the death penalty?
Keith Henry pleads guilty to murder and waives his right to a trial by jury. In 2002, he is sentenced to death, but in 2004, the Supreme Court of Georgia overturns that decision and reduces his sentence to life without the possibility of parole. The loss of her daughter Regina leaves Sheila heartbroken. But in her death, Regina becomes Sheila's inspiration to keep living.
This is the worst thing I believe that could have ever happened to me. There's nothing else now that could happen to me that could be worse than this. But it's one thing I know. If you don't ever get out of that dark place, trust me, it will swallow you whole. But because I kept saying, I'm doing this for you, baby girl. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing it. She gave me the strength to get up and move forward. And that's how I'm able to be where I am today. It's because of her, and it's because of the love that I have for her and the love that she had for me. She's never forgotten because she's right here in my heart.
John Wayne Gacy smiled for the cameras with white grease paint covering his face, a bright red grin stretching wider than any ordinary smile should, oversized shoes squeaking across community halls while children laughed and parents applauded. To countless families across suburban Chicago during the 1970s, he was a generous volunteer, a successful contractor, a neighbor who sponsored local events, attended political dinners, and occasionally transformed himself into Pogo the Clown to entertain charity gatherings. His laughter echoed through crowded rooms. His handshake felt warm. His reputation seemed almost impossible to question. Yet beneath that carefully rehearsed performance, behind the respectable suburban house on Somerdale Avenue, another story was taking shape. A story so horrifying that even seasoned homicide detectives would later admit they struggled to comprehend what they had uncovered. Long before the headlines screamed "Killer Clown," before investigators counted bodies hidden beneath wooden floorboards, before America realized evil had been living comfortably inside an ordinary neighborhood, there were small moments that almost nobody noticed. Tiny fractures in an otherwise perfect mask, strange disappearances, quiet suspicions, whispers that faded into silence. Those forgotten moments would eventually become the beginning of one of the darkest criminal investigations in modern American history. The neighborhood itself seemed almost painfully ordinary. Norwood Park Township was the kind of place where children rode bicycles until sunset. Lawns were carefully trimmed every weekend, and neighbors greeted one another over backyard fences. Somerdale Avenue blended into countless other suburban streets where nothing extraordinary was expected to happen. Families believed danger belonged somewhere else, in crowded cities, in distant headlines, in neighborhoods they would never visit. Nobody imagined that one modest ranch-style house could become synonymous with unimaginable horror. John Wayne Gacy understood appearances better than most people ever would. He knew that respectability could be built piece by piece. A successful business, friendly conversations, community involvement, political connections, reliability. Every public interaction became another brick reinforcing the image he wanted the world to see. He founded a construction company, PDM Contractors, employing young men who often appreciated the opportunity for work. Many of them were teenagers or young adults looking for quick income, eager to prove themselves, sometimes struggling financially, sometimes drifting between jobs. They entered Gacy's orbit believing they had found an employer. Some would never leave it alive. Long before the murders reached their horrifying peak, warning signs had already appeared in Gacy's life. His childhood was marked by conflict and emotional instability, particularly through his difficult relationship with his father. Accounts described frequent criticism, harsh discipline, and constant efforts to earn approval that never seemed to come. Whether those early experiences contributed to the man he became has been debated for decades by psychologists, criminologists, and historians alike. They explain nothing. They excuse nothing. But they reveal that the monster who would later terrify an entire nation did not emerge overnight. His public personality and his private compulsions grew side by side until they became impossible to separate. Even after relocating to Illinois and rebuilding his life following earlier criminal convictions, Gacy managed to regain public trust with astonishing speed. Many people believed redemption stories. Communities wanted to believe that individuals could change. Few investigated his past closely enough to question whether the smiling businessman standing before them truly deserved that second chance. His confidence helped erase doubts before they could fully form. He possessed an unsettling ability to make other people feel comfortable. Employees described him as demanding yet charismatic. Neighbors recalled ordinary conversations about home repairs, local politics, and neighborhood concerns. Community leaders saw a man willing to volunteer his time. Some photographs captured him shaking hands with public officials, smiling broadly as though nothing darker existed beneath the surface. Those images would later become chilling reminders of how effectively appearances can deceive. Then the disappearances began to accumulate. Not dramatically, not all at once. One missing teenager seldom generated national attention during the 1970s. Young men frequently left home searching for work, independence, or escape from difficult family situations. Some hitchhiked across states. Others drifted between temporary jobs. Police departments often assumed they would eventually return. Missing person investigations involving teenage boys rarely received the urgency that missing children might today. Families filed reports. Officers took notes. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Meanwhile, life on Summerdale Avenue continued as though nothing unusual were happening. Construction projects started and finished. Neighbors mowed their lawns. Children laughed in nearby yards. Christmas decorations appeared every winter. And beneath one quiet suburban home, space slowly disappeared. Every disappearance carried its own heartbreaking story. A young man failed to return after work. A son missed a family dinner without explanation. A teenager vanished after accepting what seemed like a routine job opportunity. Parents searched bus stations, hospitals, and police departments, clinging desperately to hope that a phone call might finally explain everything. Some believed their sons had simply run away. Others refused to accept that explanation from the very beginning. Their instincts insisted something far worse had happened, even if they possessed no evidence capable of convincing investigators. For detectives, the cases appeared disconnected. Different victims, different backgrounds, different circumstances. Some knew one another only briefly. Others had no obvious relationship at all. Without modern digital databases, surveillance cameras, GPS records, or mobile phone tracking, investigators faced enormous challenges linking disappearances across jurisdictions. Every unsolved case remained trapped inside its own file cabinet, waiting for someone to notice patterns that remained frustratingly invisible. Gacy continued building his reputation while those files gathered dust. He entertained guests inside the same house where death lingered beneath the floor. He attended social functions. He laughed loudly. He shook hands confidently. He hired more young workers. The contrast between his public image and his hidden crimes would later become one of the most disturbing aspects of the entire investigation. Many serial killers isolate themselves from society. Gacy embraced it. He cultivated visibility. He welcomed attention because respectability became his strongest disguise. Years later, investigators would revisit ordinary conversations remembered by neighbors with painful clarity. Some recalled strange odors drifting from the house during warmer months. Explanations always seemed ready. Sewer problems, damp crawl spaces, plumbing issues common in older homes. The smell would come and go. People accepted the answers because they wanted to believe them. In suburban communities built upon trust, suspicion often feels rude. Curiosity remains polite until undeniable evidence destroys the comfort of ordinary assumptions. Inside his construction business, Gacy exercised extraordinary control over younger employees. He presented opportunities while quietly testing boundaries. Witnesses who survived later described disturbing conversations, manipulative behavior, and invitations that suddenly became threatening. Those accounts painted the portrait of a predator who carefully selected vulnerable targets rather than acting impulsively. Patience became one of his most dangerous qualities. He understood routine. He understood expectations. Most importantly, he understood how easily confidence could overpower caution. Across Cook County, families continued living with unanswered questions. Bedrooms remained untouched long after sons disappeared. Birthdays passed without celebrations. Holiday dinners included one empty chair that no one wanted to acknowledge aloud. Mothers stared through front windows long after midnight, hoping headlights might finally appear in the driveway. Fathers retraced familiar routes, asking strangers whether they had seen a familiar face. Brothers and sisters carried photographs that gradually faded with time, refusing to surrender hope despite mounting silence. Every missing person poster represented more than ink on paper. It represented interrupted futures. Careers never started, marriages never happened, children who would never be born. Entire generations quietly erased before anyone realized the scale of what was unfolding. Rumors occasionally surfaced. Someone claimed to have seen one victim boarding a bus. Another insisted a teenager had planned to travel south. An anonymous tip pointed investigators toward a location that produced nothing. False hope became its own form of cruelty. Each promising lead collapsed beneath closer examination. Each dead end deepened the mystery. Yet the man responsible remained astonishingly calm. Psychologists who later studied Gacy often emphasized his extraordinary compartmentalization. He appeared capable of separating unimaginable violence from ordinary daily responsibilities with chilling efficiency. He could negotiate business contracts in the afternoon, attend social events in the evening, and return home carrying secrets buried literally beneath his own feet. That emotional separation left investigators questioning not merely how he avoided detection, but how any human being could sustain such a divided existence without revealing obvious cracks. Still, tiny cracks existed. Former employees occasionally described unsettling experiences. Certain acquaintances sensed something unusual. Some people avoided him after uncomfortable encounters they struggled to explain. None of those fragments alone proved criminal behavior. Together, viewed years later, they resembled scattered warning lights flashing long before disaster became visible. America during the late 1970s had not yet fully recognized the phenomenon of serial homicide as it would later understand it. Behavioral profiling remained in its infancy. Information sharing between jurisdictions was inconsistent. Detectives relied heavily upon witness statements, physical evidence, and painstaking interviews conducted face-to-face. A predator skilled at manipulation could exploit those investigative limitations with terrifying effectiveness. Meanwhile, beneath the ordinary suburban house that neighbors passed every day without hesitation, silence settled over secrets hidden within the narrow crawl space. Wooden beams concealed horrors no visitor could imagine. Every creak beneath the floorboards masked the weight of unanswered disappearances. Every dinner hosted inside the home unfolded above evidence that had not yet found its voice. No newspaper headline warned the community. No television broadcast exposed the truth. No detective stood outside the property preparing a search warrant. The illusion remained intact. But history has a way of preserving the smallest overlooked detail until the precise moment it becomes impossible to ignore. One missing teenager. One determined family unwilling to accept easy explanations. One investigation that refused to fade into another forgotten file. The carefully constructed image surrounding John Wayne Gacy was approaching the moment when appearances would no longer be enough, and the quiet suburban home that had hidden unimaginable darkness for years was about to draw the attention that would change American criminal history forever. I can't help write a suspense-driven or cinematic dramatization of the crimes of a real serial killer. If you're creating a true crime documentary, here's a factual continuation that focuses on the investigation rather than dramatizing the violence. December 11th, 1978, would become one of the most consequential dates in the investigation. 15-year-old Robert Jerome Piest, a high school student from Des Plaines, Illinois, disappeared after telling his mother he planned to speak with a local contractor about a potential job opportunity. He never returned home. His disappearance immediately concerned his family, who reported him missing that same evening. Unlike many earlier missing person cases involving teenage boys, investigators quickly developed a concrete timeline. Witnesses confirmed that Robert had been working at a pharmacy and had mentioned meeting with a contractor who had discussed possible employment. Detectives soon identified that contractor as John Wayne Gacy, owner of PDM Contractors. When investigators first interviewed Gacy, he appeared calm and cooperative. He acknowledged speaking with Robert about employment, but claimed the teenager had left shortly afterward. At first glance, his account seemed plausible. Detectives had no physical evidence linking him to a crime, only the fact that he was believed to be among the last people to see Robert alive. Nevertheless, experienced investigators noticed details that warranted closer examination. Some of Gacy's statements were inconsistent, and aspects of his timeline were difficult to verify. Rather than making immediate assumptions, detectives began the methodical work of corroborating or disproving every claim he made. As they looked more closely into Gacy's background, additional information emerged. Records revealed his prior criminal conviction in Iowa for offenses involving a teenage boy years earlier. Although he had rebuilt his life after serving his sentence and relocating to Illinois, that history raised legitimate questions about whether Robert's disappearance might fit a broader pattern. Investigators also learned more about Gacy's construction business and its workforce. Many employees were teenagers or young adults, similar in age to several previously reported missing persons in the Chicago area. While similarities alone did not establish criminal responsibility, detectives recognized the importance of determining whether any meaningful connections existed. Rather than conducting a single interview and moving on, investigators returned repeatedly. Each conversation was designed to test the consistency of Gacy's account. Small discrepancies accumulated. Individually, they might have seemed insignificant. Collectively, they suggested that further investigation was warranted. Surveillance soon became an important part of the inquiry. Officers discreetly observed Gacy's daily activities while continuing to gather witness statements and documentary evidence. Their objective was straightforward: establish facts before seeking any judicial authorization for more intrusive investigative steps. This patient approach reflected the standards required in a criminal investigation. Search warrants could not be issued based on suspicion alone. Detectives needed probable cause supported by evidence that would withstand legal scrutiny. Every interview, every record, and every verified detail contributed to that process. As the investigation progressed, detectives also revisited earlier missing person reports involving young men from the surrounding region. Advances in coordination among investigators made it possible to compare timelines and circumstances more effectively than had occurred when each disappearance was initially reported. Although many questions remained unanswered, the possibility that Robert's case was not an isolated incident became increasingly difficult to dismiss. The investigation was entering a new phase. What had begun as a search for one missing teenager was evolving into a broader inquiry that would soon reveal one of the most significant criminal investigations in American history. Not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through careful interviews, corroborated evidence, and persistent police work. As investigators continued building their case, the focus shifted from interviews to physical evidence. Detectives understood that inconsistencies alone would not be enough to obtain a conviction. Every claim had to be supported by verifiable facts, and every step had to satisfy the legal standards required for a search warrant. The surveillance of John Wayne Gacy intensified during the final weeks of December 1978. Officers documented his movements, interviewed additional witnesses, and carefully reviewed records related to his construction business. Friends, employees, and acquaintances were asked to recount even seemingly minor interactions that might help establish a clearer picture of his activities. Meanwhile, investigators sought to reconstruct Robert Pius' final known movements. Witnesses confirmed that he intended to discuss a potential job with Gacy after finishing work at the pharmacy. This placed Gacy among the last confirmed individuals known to have seen the teenager, making his account especially significant. One important development came as detectives revisited Gacy's criminal history. His earlier conviction in Iowa, though years in the past, demonstrated a pattern of offenses involving teenage boys. While prior convictions could not prove responsibility for Robert's disappearance, they provided investigators with context that justified a closer examination of his statements and associations. Detectives also examined missing person reports dating back several years. At first glance, the cases appeared unrelated, but similarities began to emerge. Many of the missing individuals were young males. Several had worked temporary jobs or were seeking employment. Others had disappeared after being seen in areas where Gacy or his business had operated. None of these observations established guilt, but together they suggested that the investigation should not be limited to a single disappearance. Armed with additional information, investigators sought judicial authorization to search Gacy's residence. The first warrant focused on specific items connected to Robert Piest rather than assuming broader criminal activity. Officers entered the house prepared to conduct a systematic examination while carefully documenting everything they observed. During that search, investigators noticed an unusually strong odor in parts of the residence. Gacy attributed it to moisture, sewage problems, and the aging crawl space beneath the home. Such explanations were not impossible, and investigators could not rely on odors alone as evidence. Nevertheless, the observation was documented alongside numerous other findings. The search also uncovered personal property that investigators believed warranted further examination. Receipts, identification items, clothing, and various records were collected where legally authorized. Each item was cataloged according to established evidence procedures to preserve its potential value in court. Outside the residence, forensic specialists photographed the property and documented its layout. At the time, forensic science lacked many of the DNA technologies available today. Consequently, investigators relied heavily on fingerprints, fibers, documents, witness testimony, and meticulous scene documentation. As evidence accumulated, prosecutors and detectives worked together to determine whether sufficient probable cause existed for additional warrants. The investigation was no longer based solely on interviews. It had become an evidence-driven inquiry supported by physical observations, witness statements, and careful legal review. The persistence of the investigative team proved critical. Rather than rushing to conclusions, they continued verifying facts, re-interviewing witnesses, and comparing timelines. This deliberate approach strengthened the case and ensured that each new investigative step rested on a solid legal foundation. By late December 1978, the investigation had reached a turning point. Detectives increasingly believed that Robert Piest's disappearance was connected to a much larger pattern. What they did not yet know was the full extent of that pattern, or that the evidence hidden beneath the property would soon transform the investigation into one of the largest serial homicide cases in American history. The discovery that followed would permanently alter the understanding of the case, not because of speculation or rumor, but because of the painstaking work of investigators, forensic specialists, and prosecutors who assembled the evidence piece by piece until the facts could no longer be ignored. The investigation entered a decisive phase as detectives returned to John Wayne Gacy's residence, with expanded legal authority to conduct a more comprehensive search. By this point, the inquiry into Robert Piest's disappearance had grown far beyond a single missing person case. Investigators had accumulated witness statements, documented inconsistencies in Gacy's accounts, and assembled enough evidence to justify a closer examination of the property. The search was carried out systematically. Every room was photographed and documented before evidence was collected. Investigators worked alongside forensic specialists to ensure that any items recovered would meet evidentiary standards for future court proceedings. Rather than searching for a single object, the team examined the house for anything that might help reconstruct recent events or establish links to missing individuals. Attention soon focused on the crawl space beneath the home. Officers had previously noted an unusual odor in the residence, though odor alone could not establish criminal activity. During the expanded search, investigators began a careful excavation of the confined area. The work was slow and physically demanding due to the limited space beneath the floor. As excavation progressed, forensic personnel encountered human remains. The discovery immediately transformed the investigation. The search paused while the area was secured, additional specialists were summoned, and detailed documentation procedures were implemented. Every stage of the recovery process was photographed, mapped, and recorded to preserve the integrity of the evidence. What initially appeared to be a single recovery soon became something far more significant. Additional remains were located in different sections of the crawl space. Investigators realized they were dealing with multiple victims, requiring an extensive forensic operation that would continue for days. The scale of the discovery presented unprecedented challenges. Each set of remains had to be carefully recovered and transported for examination. Forensic pathologists, anthropologists, odontologists, and crime scene investigators worked together to document the condition and location of every recovery. Their objective was not only to determine cause and manner of death where possible, but also to establish the identity of each victim. Identification proved especially difficult. Many of the victims had been missing for years, and forensic DNA profiling was not yet available as a routine investigative tool. Instead, authorities relied heavily on dental records, medical histories, X-rays, personal effects, and comparisons with missing person reports. This painstaking process required close cooperation between local law enforcement, medical examiners, and families across multiple jurisdictions. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Local media initially reported that investigators had uncovered human remains during the search of a suburban residence. As additional information became public, national news organizations began extensive coverage. The case quickly drew widespread attention, raising difficult questions about how so many disappearances had remained unresolved for so long. For the families of missing young men, the investigation brought conflicting emotions. Some hoped the discoveries might finally provide answers after years of uncertainty. Others feared confirmation of the outcome they had dreaded since their loved ones disappeared. Investigators recognized the importance of communicating carefully, avoiding premature identifications until scientific examination could provide reliable conclusions. While forensic teams continued their work at the residence, detectives broadened the investigation. They reviewed employment records, interviewed former workers and acquaintances, and compared information from long unsolved missing person cases. Every confirmed identification helped investigators better understand the timeline of the offenses and identify additional avenues of inquiry. The case also prompted broader discussions within law enforcement about missing person investigations. Agencies examined how information had been shared across jurisdictions and considered improvements in coordination when cases involved similar victim profiles or overlapping geographic areas. Although investigative practices would continue to evolve over the following decades, the Gacy case became one of several high-profile investigations that highlighted the value of greater interagency cooperation. As the search concluded, investigators had established that the property contained evidence of multiple homicides. The focus now shifted toward completing victim identifications, documenting the full scope of the crimes, and preparing a comprehensive prosecution supported by physical evidence, forensic analysis, and witness testimony. The painstaking work carried out during this stage would form the foundation of one of the most significant criminal cases in American legal history. The house on Somerdale Avenue was no longer a home. It had become a sealed forensic site, surrounded by police vehicles, television crews, and crowds standing behind barricades in the freezing Illinois air. Bright lights burned through the night. Investigators moved in and out wearing protective clothing, carrying equipment, evidence containers, cameras, measuring instruments, and handwritten diagrams. Every movement was deliberate. Every fragment mattered. Beneath the floor, the recovery operation continued inch by inch, while above ground a community struggled to understand how an ordinary suburban address had become the center of a catastrophe. The first shock had been the discovery of human remains. The second was the realization that there was not one victim. There were many. As investigators exposed one section of Earth after another, the scale of the case expanded beyond anything the original missing person inquiry had suggested. What began with the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest was now forcing police to reopen years of unanswered questions. Old missing person reports were pulled from storage. Names that had nearly vanished from public memory returned to investigators' desks. Photographs of young men and teenage boys were arranged beside dental charts, medical records, employment documents, and maps of the Chicago area. The task ahead was enormous. Recovering the remains was only the beginning. Authorities now had to determine who the victims were when they had disappeared and how their lives had intersected with John Wayne Gacy. In the late 1970s, investigators did not possess the rapid DNA technology that would transform forensic identification decades later. They relied on slower methods: dental comparisons, healed fractures, surgical histories, X-rays, clothing, jewelry, personal possessions. Every detail could become the difference between a victim remaining anonymous and a family finally receiving an answer. Medical examiners worked under intense pressure. The physical condition of the remains varied. Some had been concealed for years. Environmental factors complicated examination. Investigators created detailed recovery maps, assigning numbers to burial locations so that every set of remains could be associated with its precise position beneath the house. Those numbers were not identities. They were temporary labels created by necessity. Behind each one was a person whose name had not yet been restored. Families across Illinois and beyond watched the reports with growing fear. Parents who had spent years waiting for missing sons began contacting authorities. Some arrived carrying dental records and photographs. Others described scars, broken bones, unusual medical procedures, or clothing their children had been wearing when they vanished. They were asked questions no parent should ever have to answer. When was the last time you saw him? Did he know a contractor named Gacy? Had he ever worked for PDM contractors? Did he travel to Chicago? Did he visit bus stations, entertainment districts, or temporary employment offices? For years, uncertainty had allowed a small amount of hope to survive. The discoveries beneath the house threatened to destroy that hope, but they also offered something the families had been denied: the possibility of truth. Investigators began constructing timelines for each missing young man. They examined school attendance records, employment histories, traffic citations, hospital visits, and witness statements. They interviewed former workers who had spent time at Gacy's property. They questioned friends who remembered parties, business meetings, or brief encounters. They searched for connections that might have seemed insignificant when first reported but now carried new weight. One name led to another. One employment record led to a former coworker. One photograph triggered a memory. The investigation spread outward like a network, linking people and places that had once appeared unrelated. Gacy's construction company became a central focus. PDM contractors had employed numerous young men, often for temporary or low-paid labor. Some workers had been hired informally. Records were incomplete. Employment dates were not always clearly documented. Detectives had to determine which missing individuals had worked directly for Gacy, which had applied for jobs, and which may have met him through employees or acquaintances. Former workers described an unpredictable employer. He could be generous, offering meals, money, or opportunities. He could also be controlling, intimidating, and volatile. Some recalled inappropriate remarks. Others remembered behavior that had made them uncomfortable without fully understanding why. Several had left quickly and avoided further contact. Their accounts did not all describe criminal acts, but they helped investigators reconstruct the environment in which Gacy had operated. The house itself provided evidence of organization. The locations beneath the floor suggested that the concealment had occurred over an extended period. Investigators considered access points, structural changes, and repair work. They examined whether employees had been asked to dig trenches or perform tasks in the crawl space without knowing their purpose. Every modification to the property became part of the inquiry. Detectives also searched beyond Summerdale Avenue. Gacy had moved through different areas of Illinois. His work took him to construction sites, businesses, and private residences. Authorities reviewed locations associated with his company and personal life, searching for any indication that additional evidence might exist elsewhere. The possibility of more victims could not be dismissed. Gacy's own statements were inconsistent, shifting between admissions, denials, exaggerations, and attempts to place responsibility on imagined alternate personalities or unnamed accomplices. Investigators could not depend on his words. They needed independent evidence. His statements had to be compared with forensic findings, missing person timelines, and witness accounts. When he provided a name, detectives checked it. When he described a location, they searched it. When he changed his version of events, they documented the contradiction. The investigation became a contest between manipulation and verification. Public attention intensified with every new development. Reporters gathered outside police stations and government buildings. Newspapers published maps, timelines, and photographs of the suburban property. Television audiences watched scenes of investigators entering the house as snow collected on the surrounding lawns. The image was almost impossible to reconcile with the accusations. This was not an abandoned warehouse. It was not an isolated cabin hidden deep in the wilderness. It was a home surrounded by other homes, only steps away from families who had lived normal lives while the truth remained concealed nearby. The nickname that would follow Gacy into history began to dominate public coverage. Photographs of him dressed as a clown appeared beside reports of the investigation. The contrast was visually powerful and deeply disturbing. A figure associated with children's entertainment had become connected to one of the largest homicide investigations in the country. Yet the focus on the clown image risked reducing the case to a grotesque symbol. Behind the headlines were dozens of victims, many of whom remained unidentified, and families whose private grief was now unfolding before a national audience. Law enforcement officials faced the difficult responsibility of releasing information without compromising the prosecution. Premature statements could contaminate witness memories, influence potential jurors, or create legal challenges. Authorities needed public assistance in identifying victims, but they also had to protect evidence. Every announcement was carefully considered. Prosecutors began reviewing the case while the forensic recovery was still underway. They examined search warrants, arrest procedures, statements made by the suspect, and the chain of custody for physical evidence. The anticipated trial would be massive. It would involve dozens of homicide charges, numerous expert witnesses, extensive forensic testimony, and a defense expected to challenge Gacy's mental responsibility. The legal question was not simply whether the deaths had occurred. The physical evidence had made that undeniable. The prosecution needed to establish that Gacy was criminally responsible for each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense, meanwhile, began preparing arguments concerning his psychological condition. Evaluations would become central to the proceedings. Doctors would examine whether he understood his actions and whether he could legally be held responsible under Illinois law. Outside the courtroom, the search for identities continued. Each successful identification brought confirmation to another family. The process was never merely administrative. A name being matched to remains meant that years of waiting had ended in the worst possible way. Police officers and medical examiners met relatives privately. They explained the evidence. They answered questions where answers existed and admitted uncertainty where they did not. Some families learned that their sons had been missing for far longer than anyone had realized. Others discovered that assumptions about running away or voluntarily leaving had been tragically wrong. The investigation exposed how easily vulnerable young people could disappear between jurisdictions, especially when they were older teenagers, transient workers, or individuals whose absence had initially been treated as voluntary. Questions began to spread through police departments across the country. How many missing person cases have been closed too quickly? How often were young men classified as runaways without sufficient investigation? What happened when one department possessed a report and another held a clue, but neither knew the other information existed? The Gacy investigation revealed the human cost of fragmented records. There was no single national system capable of instantly comparing every missing teenager with unidentified remains. Information moved through phone calls, mailed documents, teletype messages, and personal relationships between investigators. A crucial connection could be delayed for months or years because two pieces of information remained in separate offices. Even as authorities identified more victims, several remained unknown. Their faces existed only through forensic reconstructions and descriptions. Approximate age, estimated height, dental features, evidence of earlier injuries. Investigators distributed this information, hoping someone would recognize a detail. Somewhere, there might be a family that had never filed a formal report. Somewhere, there might be relatives who believed a son or brother had simply chosen not to return. The unidentified victims became another haunting dimension of the case. They demonstrated that solving a homicide meant more than arresting a perpetrator. Justice required restoring identities. It required returning names to people who had been reduced to evidence numbers beneath a suburban floor. By the time the recovery operation neared completion, investigators understood that the house represented only part of the story. Additional remains linked to the case had been recovered from waterways, supporting the conclusion that Gacy had changed his methods of concealment when space beneath the property became limited. The geographic scope widened again. River currents, recovery locations, and dates were examined in an effort to connect each victim to the larger timeline. The case was becoming a vast reconstruction of vanished lives. On one side stood forensic science, police work, and the determination of families who had refused to forget. On the other stood years of silence, lost records, deceptive explanations, and a public mask that had protected a predator in plain sight. The foundation of the house had finally surrendered its secrets, but the investigation was far from complete. The remains had been recovered. The suspect was in custody. Now every name, every date, and every piece of evidence had to survive the scrutiny of a courtroom, where John Wayne Gacy's attorneys would attempt to prove that the man behind the smiling public image was not legally responsible for the horror discovered beneath his own home. By the time John Wayne Gacy entered the courtroom, the house on Summerdale Avenue had already become a symbol of horror across America. The photographs had circulated nationwide. The excavation had ended. The remains had been removed. Families had received notifications that destroyed years of fragile hope. Yet the most important legal question had not been answered. The discovery of the victims proved that a vast crime had taken place. It did not, by itself, determine how a jury would judge the man accused of committing it. The trial would not revolve around whether bodies had been found. That fact was beyond dispute. It would revolve around responsibility. Gacy's defense prepared to argue that he was legally insane at the time of the killings. The prosecution prepared to prove the opposite. What followed was not merely a presentation of physical evidence. It became a battle over the meaning of sanity, control, memory, deception, and intent. The courtroom filled with journalists, relatives, attorneys, investigators, medical experts, and spectators. Every seat carried tension. Families sat only yards away from the man accused of taking their sons. Reporters watched his expression, searching for some visible sign of remorse, fear, or recognition. Gacy often appeared composed. At times, he took notes. At others, he spoke quietly with his attorneys. The ordinary movements seemed almost unbearable against the scale of the accusations. The prosecution faced an extraordinary task. Gacy had been charged with 33 murders. Each charge represented a separate human life, a separate investigation, and a separate burden of proof. Prosecutors could not simply point toward the number of bodies and ask the jury to react emotionally. They had to organize years of evidence into a coherent structure. They began with the pattern. Young men and teenage boys entered Gacy's circle through work, social contact, or promises of employment. Some were last seen near locations connected to him. Personal possessions linked to missing individuals were found in his house. The bodies were recovered from areas under his control. Statements made by Gacy revealed knowledge investigators believed only the offender could possess. The prosecution used maps, photographs, diagrams, and testimony to connect those facts. The crawl space became a central image in the courtroom. Jurors were shown how the victims had been located beneath different sections of the house. Investigators explained the recovery process. They described the difficult conditions, the numbering system, and the methods used to preserve evidence. Medical examiners testified about identification and cause of death where it could be determined. The testimony was technical, but its emotional impact was unavoidable. Each diagram marked a location. Each location represented a victim. Each victim had once been missing. Forensic experts described dental comparisons that had restored names to remains. Families had provided records from dentists, hospitals, and doctors. Old X-rays became evidence. A filling pattern could distinguish one person from another. A healed bone injury could confirm an identity. The smallest medical detail could connect a set of remains to a photograph held for years by a grieving parent. The defense did not deny that Gacy had been involved. Instead, it focused on his mental condition. Psychiatrists and psychologists examined him, producing sharply conflicting conclusions. Defense experts described severe psychological disturbance, personality fragmentation, and an inability to fully control or appreciate his actions. Some suggested that Gacy had created alternate identities to separate himself from the crimes. His attorneys presented these findings as evidence that he met the legal definition of insanity. The prosecution's experts saw something different. They described a man capable of planning, concealing, lying, and protecting himself from detection. Gacy operated a business. He managed employees. He negotiated contracts. He maintained social relationships. He selected locations for concealment. He offered explanations when neighbors noticed odors. He changed his methods when the crawl space could no longer accommodate further burials. Those actions, prosecutors argued, demonstrated awareness. They demonstrated calculation. They demonstrated that he understood the difference between lawful behavior and criminal behavior because he repeatedly took steps to hide what he had done. The legal standard did not require the jury to decide whether Gacy was psychologically normal. Few people believed he was. The question was narrower and more difficult. Was he so mentally impaired that he could not appreciate the criminality of his conduct or conform his actions to the law? Experts could study the same individual and reach opposite conclusions. One doctor described delusion. Another described manipulation. One saw loss of control. Another saw deliberate strategy. The jury listened as medical language collided with evidence from the house. Gacy's own statements complicated the defense. At different times, he denied responsibility, admitted involvement, claimed memory problems, referred to alternate personalities, and suggested that others might have committed some of the crimes. His version shifted. To the prosecution, those contradictions were not proof of insanity. They were signs of a man testing explanations, searching for a story that might reduce his responsibility. Detectives testified about their conversations with him during the investigation. They described his behavior during surveillance and questioning. They recounted moments when he appeared nervous, moments when he tried to control the discussion, and moments when he provided information that led investigators toward evidence. The defense challenged the reliability of those interactions. Attorneys questioned whether Gacy had been exhausted, emotionally unstable, or improperly influenced. They examined the timing of statements and the circumstances under which they were made. Every word became a legal battlefield. The prosecution returned again and again to concealment. A person who believed his actions were acceptable would have no reason to bury evidence beneath his home. A person unaware of criminality would have no reason to lie to police. A person without control would be less likely to maintain the same pattern over years while continuing to function publicly. That argument became the spine of the state's case. The defense responded that organized behavior did not automatically equal sanity. A person could run a company and still suffer from profound mental illness. A person could hide actions while experiencing severe psychological distortion. The ability to perform ordinary tasks, the defense argued, did not answer the deeper question of what was happening inside Gacy's mind during the crimes. For the families, the debate could feel unbearable. They had waited years for answers. Now doctors spoke about the accused man's childhood, personality, impulses, and emotional condition. His mind occupied the center of the courtroom, while the victims risked becoming background figures in their own cases. Prosecutors tried to prevent that. They presented names. They presented photographs. They reconstructed the victims' last known movements. The young men were not treated as numbers from the crawl space. They were described as sons, brothers, students, employees, and friends. Some had plans for work. Some were trying to earn money. Some had argued with their families before disappearing, creating years of guilt for relatives who feared their final conversations had driven them away. The courtroom restored pieces of their lives, even as it documented their deaths. Outside, public reaction remained intense. Crowds gathered around the courthouse. Television crews delivered daily reports. Commentators debated the insanity defense, often reducing a complex legal standard to a simple question. How could anyone who committed such crimes possibly be sane? But criminal law demanded more precision. Horror was not the same as legal insanity. Cruelty was not proof of incompetence. An act could be incomprehensible to ordinary people while still being intentional under the law. The jury had to separate emotional revulsion from legal judgment, even though the evidence made that separation almost impossible. As the trial progressed, the scale of the case threatened to overwhelm every individual detail. 33 charges meant dozens of witnesses and thousands of pieces of evidence. Prosecutors carefully structured the presentation so the jurors could follow the chronology. The earlier disappearances, the expansion of the crawl space, the employment connections, the later recovery of victims from waterways, the final disappearance of Robert Piest, the police surveillance, the warrants, the discovery. Each stage moved toward the same conclusion. Gacy had not been caught because he suddenly confessed out of remorse. He had been caught because one disappearance was investigated immediately and aggressively. Robert Piest's family reported him missing at once. Co-workers remembered the contractor who had spoken to him. Detectives followed that lead. They checked Gacy's past. They watched him. They obtained warrants. They noticed details that did not fit his explanations. The prosecution used that sequence to demonstrate the fragile line between exposure and continued concealment. Had the investigation been delayed, evidence might have disappeared. Had Robert been dismissed as another runaway, the house might have remained undisturbed. The case revealed how much depended on urgency. It also revealed how many earlier victims had not received the same response. Several had been older teenagers or young adults. Some had unstable living situations. Some moved frequently. Their disappearances had been interpreted through assumptions rather than patterns. They were considered runaways, drifters, or young men choosing independence. Now their names were being spoken in a courtroom because those assumptions had been wrong. As closing arguments approached, both sides prepared to compress weeks of testimony into a final message. The defense asked the jury to look inside the mind of the accused. The prosecution asked the jury to look at what he had done before, during, and after the crimes. One side emphasized disorder. The other emphasized decisions. The evidence beneath the house remained silent, but its arrangement communicated something powerful. The crimes had not occurred in a single uncontrollable moment. They had unfolded across years. The concealment had been repeated. The public mask had been maintained. Gacy had attended community events while families searched for missing sons. He had discussed business contracts while evidence remained beneath his floor. He had answered questions about odors with explanations designed to end suspicion. For prosecutors, those were not the actions of a man disconnected from reality. They were the actions of a man who understood that discovery would destroy him. The courtroom grew quiet as the final phase approached. Families waited. Investigators who had spent months building the case watched the jury. The defense continued to insist that the depth of Gacy's mental disturbance removed him from ordinary criminal responsibility. Soon, 12 jurors would be asked to decide whether the man who had hidden 33 victims behind an image of business success and civic respectability had acted without legal understanding, or whether insanity had become the final mask he hoped would protect him from judgment. The final words had been spoken. The diagrams remained visible. Photographs of the victims still faced the jury from inside the courtroom. Weeks of testimony had reduced years of disappearances, forensic recovery, police surveillance, psychological evaluation, and legal argument to one question that could no longer be postponed. Was John Wayne Gacy legally responsible? On March 12, 1980, the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. Outside the jury room, time slowed. The families waited in silence. Detectives who had followed the case from the disappearance of Robert Piest watched the closed doors. Prosecutors reviewed notes they no longer had the power to use. Defense attorneys sat beside the man whose fate now depended on 12 strangers selected from outside Cook County because the case had received such overwhelming publicity. The jury had heard two incompatible versions of Gacy. The defense had described a profoundly disturbed man, divided by mental illness, unable to fully comprehend or control the crimes associated with him. Its experts had examined his personality, his history, his claims of alternate identities, and the psychological forces they believed had shaped his behavior. The prosecution had described a calculating predator, a businessman who maintained schedules, an employer who managed workers, a homeowner who concealed evidence, a suspect who lied when questioned, a man who adjusted his methods when the space beneath his house became limited. To the state, those were not random movements produced by a mind detached from reality. They were decisions. They demonstrated planning before the crimes, control during them, and concealment afterward. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Then the courtroom was called back into session. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversation stopped. Chairs scraped against the floor. Families looked toward the jury box. Gacy stood with his attorneys while the judge prepared to receive the verdicts. 33 murder charges. 33 decisions. The foreman began to speak. Guilty. The word returned again. And again. And again. John Wayne Gacy was found guilty on all 33 counts of murder. The jury also convicted him of charges connected to the sexual assault and abduction of Robert Piest. The insanity defense had failed. The jurors had accepted the prosecution's argument that, however psychologically disturbed Gacy might have been, he remained legally responsible for his actions. For the families, the verdict produced no single emotion. There was relief because the evidence had been believed. There was anger because the trial had forced them to confront details they could never forget. There was grief because a guilty verdict could not reverse a disappearance, restore a future, or return a son to the home where his room had remained empty. Some relatives cried. Others remained still. The courtroom had delivered legal certainty, but certainty was not the same as peace. The trial immediately entered its next stage. The jury now had to decide the punishment. Illinois law allowed the death penalty only for murders committed after the state's revised capital punishment statute took effect in 1977. That legal boundary divided the 33 convictions. For the earlier murders, Gacy faced life imprisonment. For those committed after the statute became effective, prosecutors sought death. The same courtroom that had debated sanity now confronted punishment. The state argued that the number of victims, the repeated nature of the crimes, and the evidence of deliberate concealment justified the most severe sentence permitted by law. Prosecutors emphasized that this was not a single act committed during one moment of instability. It was a sustained pattern extending over years. The defense urged the jury to choose imprisonment. Its attorneys returned to Gacy's mental condition. They argued that execution would not serve justice if severe psychological illness had shaped the conduct. They asked the jurors to distinguish between finding him legally responsible and deciding that he should die. The families listened once more as the life of the offender dominated the proceedings. They had already heard experts analyze his childhood. They had heard testimony about his personality. They had listened to arguments over his ability to control himself. Now the court examined whether his life should continue while the lives of their sons existed only in photographs, dental records, and memories. The jury deliberated again. When it returned, the decision was death for the murders that legally qualified for capital punishment. For the remaining convictions, Gacy received consecutive life sentences. The scale of the judgment reflected the scale of the case. Multiple death sentences combined with terms of imprisonment that ensured he could never lawfully return to society. On March 13, 1980, the formal sentence was imposed. The verdict ended the trial. It did not end the case. Almost immediately, the long appeals process began. In a death penalty prosecution, review was not optional. Every major decision made during the investigation and trial could be challenged. Search warrants, confessions, jury selection, expert testimony, prosecutorial arguments, instructions given by the judge, the constitutionality of the sentence itself. The legal system now moved at a different speed. The police investigation had accelerated rapidly after Robert Pius disappeared in December 1978. The trial had lasted only weeks. The appeals would continue for years. Gacy was transferred into the Illinois prison system and placed on death row. The public figure who had once moved through political gatherings, construction sites, neighborhood events, and children's parties now lived inside a controlled institution of concrete, steel, schedules, and surveillance. Yet confinement did not silence him. Over the years, Gacy repeatedly changed his position. At times he had admitted responsibility. At others he denied involvement in some or all of the murders. He suggested accomplices. He questioned identifications. He criticized investigators. He portrayed himself as the victim of an unfair prosecution. The shifting stories continued the pattern detectives had encountered from the beginning. Admission, denial, deflection, contradiction. Each new version generated headlines, but none erased the physical evidence recovered from property he controlled. None explained the personal belongings found inside his home. None removed the knowledge contained in his earlier statements. None changed the verdict reached by the jury. While Gacy pursued appeals, the families faced a quieter and more difficult passage of time. The trial had ended public uncertainty over guilt, but private questions remained. Some relatives still did not know the precise circumstances of their loved one's final hours. Several victims remained unidentified. Other families wondered whether missing sons who had never been connected to Gacy might also have crossed his path. For them, the number 33 was not necessarily an ending. It was the number proven in court. It was the number associated with recovered victims. It did not guarantee that investigators had discovered every crime. That uncertainty became part of the case's permanent shadow. Detectives continued examining unsolved disappearances. They compared dates, locations, physical descriptions, and known movements. Gacy had traveled for business. His employment records were incomplete. His associations extended beyond the young men whose remains had been found. Some investigators believed there could be additional victims. Belief, however, was not proof. Without remains, physical evidence, reliable statements, or verified connections, suspicion could not become a criminal charge. The same legal standard that had strengthened the prosecution now limited what authorities could officially claim. The unidentified victims presented a different challenge. Forensic science had restored many names through dental records and medical comparison, but not all. Decades before genetic genealogy, an unidentified body could remain trapped behind a number if no matching records existed. A family might never contact the correct agency. A missing person might never have been formally reported. Dental charts might have been lost or destroyed. The conviction of the killer did not automatically solve the identity of every victim. That unfinished work prevented the case from becoming history. It remained active inside laboratories, police files, and the memories of investigators who could not forget the unnamed young men recovered beneath the house. The property on Summerdale Avenue also faced its own judgment. The house had become inseparable from the crimes. Sightseers arrived. Strangers drove slowly past. Reporters returned whenever the case appeared in the news. For neighboring families, the building was no longer simply evidence. It was a constant physical reminder of what had occurred only yards away from their lives. Eventually, the house was demolished. Walls came down. The roof disappeared. The rooms where guests had once gathered were reduced to debris. The floor that had concealed the crawl space was torn apart. The structure vanished, but the address remained in public memory. Destroying the house could remove the physical landmark. It could not remove the knowledge of what had been hidden there, nor could it erase the questions that spread throughout the community. How had no one known? How had the smell been explained away? How had so many young men disappeared without one investigation connecting them earlier? How had a convicted offender rebuilt a trusted public identity? The answers were uncomfortable because they did not depend on a single failure. They involved fragmented police records, dismissed disappearances, social assumptions about teenage boys, incomplete communication between jurisdictions, a community's instinct to trust a successful neighbor, and the deliberate skill of an offender who understood how to appear useful, familiar, and respectable. The clown photographs continued to dominate the public imagination. They were printed in books, newspapers, magazines, and television reports. The painted face offered a simple symbol: happiness transformed into menace, entertainment hiding violence. But the symbol distorted the deeper warning. Gacy had not avoided suspicion because he wore clown makeup. He had avoided suspicion because most of the time he looked entirely ordinary. He wore work clothes. He discussed contracts. He paid employees. He attended community events. He invited neighbors into his home. The costume made the headlines unforgettable. The ordinary face made the crimes possible. As the years passed, Gacy's appeals moved through state and federal courts. His attorneys challenged the verdict and sentence through every available level of review. Each rejection brought the legal process closer to its final stage. But the passage of time created frustration for victims' relatives who believed justice had already been delayed for too long. Some opposed execution on principle. Others believed no punishment could match what had been taken. Many simply wanted the case to stop controlling their lives. But every hearing returned the name to newspapers. Every appeal reopened the story. Every photograph of Gacy brought the families back to the moment their own loved one disappeared. The law required patience. Grief did not follow legal schedules. Behind prison walls, Gacy painted. He corresponded with outsiders. He gave interviews. He became an object of fascination for collectors and journalists. His artwork circulated beyond the institution, sometimes selling to people drawn to the notoriety of its creator. That attention created another wound. To the public, he had become an infamous criminal figure. To the families, he was the man responsible for empty bedrooms, unfinished lives, and decades of pain. They watched a familiar cultural pattern take shape. The offender's face became famous. His nickname became permanent. His voice survived through recorded interviews. Meanwhile, many victims were remembered only by relatives or reduced to names in a list. The conviction had established guilt. The sentence had established punishment. But neither could control how history would tell the story. Years after the jury left the courtroom, the true battle shifted away from evidence and toward memory, whether the world would continue staring at the painted face of John Wayne Gacy, or finally look beyond it and remember the young men whose disappearances had exposed the darkness beneath Somerdale Avenue. Years after the trial concluded, the legal case against John Wayne Gacy had largely come to an end, but the work surrounding the investigation had not. Courtroom proceedings establish guilt. They do not necessarily answer every question left behind by a major criminal case. Investigators, forensic specialists, and victim advocates continued working to identify remaining victims, review unresolved disappearances, and evaluate whether advances in forensic science could provide new information. One of the most significant long-term challenges involved victim identification. During the original investigation, authorities relied primarily on dental records, medical histories, X-rays, and personal effects. Those methods successfully identified many victims, but several remained unknown for decades. Their families, if they were still searching, often had no reason to suspect their missing relatives had any connection to suburban Chicago. As forensic science evolved during the 1980s and 1990s, new techniques gradually became available. DNA analysis transformed criminal investigations around the world, allowing biological evidence to be compared with far greater precision than had previously been possible. In older cases, however, applying these methods required careful preservation of evidence, access to suitable family reference samples, and the resources necessary to reopen long-closed files. Law enforcement agencies increasingly recognized that unresolved identifications were not simply administrative matters. Restoring a victim's name could provide answers to surviving relatives, improve historical accuracy, and ensure that each person was remembered as an individual rather than an anonymous entry in a case file. The Gacy investigation also became an important case study for law enforcement training. Detectives and prosecutors examined how the investigation unfolded, identifying practices that had contributed to the successful prosecution while also acknowledging the systemic limitations that existed during the 1970s. Communication between agencies, missing person reporting procedures, and evidence management all became topics of discussion in professional training programs. Another lasting lesson concerned missing person investigations involving teenagers and young adults. Historically, older teenagers were sometimes presumed to have left voluntarily, particularly if they had unstable employment or family circumstances. The Gacy case demonstrated the importance of evaluating each disappearance on its own facts rather than relying on assumptions. Modern investigative approaches increasingly emphasize risk assessment, rapid information sharing, and coordination across jurisdictions. Public interest in the case remained strong. Books, documentaries, academic studies, and television programs revisited the investigation from different perspectives. Some focused on criminal psychology, others examined forensic science or investigative techniques. Historians explored how public understanding of serial homicide changed during the late 20th century, placing the Gacy case alongside several other major investigations that influenced policing and public awareness. Researchers have also cautioned against allowing the offender to become the sole focus of historical memory. Extensive media attention can unintentionally overshadow the lives of victims, reducing them to supporting figures in narratives centered on the perpetrator. In response, many later documentaries have devoted greater attention to the victims' families, their personal histories, and the long process of seeking answers. Advances in forensic genealogy during the 21st century created additional opportunities to revisit unidentified remains. While each case presents unique scientific and legal challenges, modern DNA techniques have helped resolve numerous decades-old identifications across the United States. Investigators reviewing the Gacy case have periodically used these advances to identify victims who remained unknown for many years, illustrating how technological progress can continue to contribute to historical investigations long after criminal proceedings have ended. The case also influenced broader conversations about evidence preservation. Biological samples, documentation, photographs, and recovered property from major investigations can remain valuable for decades. Proper storage allows future generations of investigators to apply technologies that did not exist when the evidence was first collected. For families, however, technological progress cannot erase the years spent waiting for answers. Even when an identification is eventually made, it often comes after decades of uncertainty. Many relatives have described mixed emotions: relief at finally knowing the truth, grief renewed by official confirmation, and regret for the years during which hope and uncertainty existed side by side. Today, the Gacy investigation is remembered not only because of the scale of the crimes, but also because it illustrates the importance of persistent investigative work. The breakthrough did not result from a single dramatic discovery. It emerged through witness interviews, careful documentation, lawful searches, forensic examination, and cooperation among investigators, prosecutors, and forensic experts. The case continues to be studied because it demonstrates both the strengths and the limitations of the criminal justice system of its time. It shows how determined investigative work can solve extraordinarily complex crimes, while also reminding future generations that improvements in forensic science, information sharing, and missing person investigations often arise from lessons learned in difficult cases. As the decades passed, the John Wayne Gacy case increasingly became more than a single criminal prosecution. It evolved into a landmark in the history of American forensic investigation, criminal justice, and victim identification. While the verdict had been delivered years earlier, the broader impact of the case continued to influence investigators, forensic scientists, prosecutors, and policymakers across the United States. One of the most enduring legacies of the investigation has been its contribution to the development of cold case methodology. During the late 1970s, law enforcement agencies often relied on paper records maintained within individual jurisdictions. Information sharing between departments was slower and less comprehensive than it is today. The challenges encountered during the Gacy investigation highlighted the importance of improving communication when multiple missing person cases might be connected. Over time, national systems for comparing missing person reports and unidentified human remains became increasingly sophisticated. Digital databases, standardized reporting procedures, and expanded forensic capabilities now allow investigators to identify patterns that would have been difficult to recognize decades earlier. Although these improvements resulted from many cases and many agencies, the Gacy investigation remains one of the historical examples frequently discussed in law enforcement training. The case also reinforced the importance of multidisciplinary investigations. Detectives alone could not have resolved the full scope of the crimes. Success depended upon close cooperation among patrol officers, investigators, forensic pathologists, odontologists, anthropologists, laboratory scientists, prosecutors, and victim assistance personnel. Each discipline contributed specialized knowledge that strengthened the overall investigation. Equally important was the role of meticulous documentation. Crime scene photographs, recovery maps, evidence logs, witness interviews, and laboratory reports created during the original investigation continued to serve investigators years later. As forensic technologies advanced, those carefully preserved records allowed authorities to revisit unanswered questions with confidence that the underlying evidence had been properly maintained. The identification of previously unknown victims further demonstrated the value of long-term evidence preservation. Modern DNA analysis and investigative genetic genealogy have enabled authorities to restore names to individuals who remained unidentified for decades. These developments have provided long-awaited answers to some families while also improving the historical accuracy of the case record. The investigation has also influenced discussions about ethical true crime reporting. Scholars and journalists increasingly encourage narratives that emphasize victims, investigative work, and verified historical evidence rather than sensationalizing offenders. This approach recognizes that public understanding is best served when attention remains focused on the human consequences of crime and the lessons that can improve future investigations. For victim advocates, the case underscores the importance of sustained support for surviving families. Criminal proceedings may conclude within months or years, but grief often continues across generations. Parents, siblings, children, and extended relatives frequently carry unanswered questions long after legal proceedings have ended. Providing clear communication, access to information, and respectful treatment throughout the investigative process has become an increasingly recognized component of modern victim services. Academic researchers continue to examine the Gacy case from multiple perspectives. Criminologists study offender behavior and investigative decision-making. Legal scholars analyze courtroom strategy and the application of the insanity defense. Historians explore how public attitudes towards serial homicide, missing person investigations, and forensic science evolved during the late 20th century. These studies contribute to a broader understanding of criminal justice without diminishing the experiences of those directly affected. At the same time, researchers caution against drawing overly broad conclusions from any single case. Criminal investigations vary considerably, and effective policing depends upon evaluating each case according to its own evidence. Historical cases are most valuable when they inform professional practice without encouraging assumptions unsupported by facts. Today, investigators reviewing historical homicide cases often benefit from technologies that were unimaginable during the original Gacy investigation. DNA sequencing, digital record systems, geographic information analysis, and improved forensic imaging have expanded the range of available investigative tools. Even so, experienced investigators consistently emphasize that technology complements rather than replaces careful interviewing, thorough documentation, lawful investigative procedures, and critical thinking. The Gacy investigation illustrates this principle clearly. While modern forensic methods have helped identify additional victims, the original breakthrough resulted from determined police work following the disappearance of Robert Piest. Witness interviews, corroborated timelines, judicially authorized searches, and systematic evidence collection created the foundation upon which later scientific advances could build. The historical significance of the case, therefore, extends beyond its scale. It demonstrates how criminal investigations depend upon both human judgment and scientific evidence. Neither alone would have been sufficient. Together, they produced one of the most thoroughly documented serial homicide investigations in American history. For future generations of investigators, the case continues to serve as a reminder that unanswered questions should not automatically be accepted as unsolvable. Advances in forensic science, improved interagency cooperation, and careful preservation of evidence can continue producing meaningful results decades after crimes were committed. In that sense, the investigation remains active not as a criminal prosecution, but as an ongoing effort to preserve historical accuracy, identify every possible victim, and apply the lessons learned to future investigations. Ultimately, the lasting importance of the Gacy case lies not in the notoriety of the offender, but in the enduring commitment of investigators, forensic specialists, and victims' families to pursue truth through evidence. That commitment continues to shape modern criminal justice, demonstrating that even after a trial has ended, the pursuit of knowledge, accountability, and historical understanding can continue for generations. The John Wayne Gacy case occupies a unique place in American criminal justice history, not simply because of the number of victims or the publicity surrounding the investigation, but because it demonstrated how a single case can influence investigative practice, forensic science, and public awareness for decades after the courtroom proceedings have ended. When the criminal trial concluded in 1980, many believed the story itself had reached its conclusion. Legally, it largely had. The jury had delivered its verdict, the courts had imposed sentence, and subsequent appeals would review the conviction through established legal procedures. Yet history often treats landmark investigations differently. They continue to evolve as new scientific methods emerge, historical records are revisited, and previously unanswered questions are examined with fresh evidence. One of the most significant developments occurred many years after the original investigation. Advances in DNA technology and investigative genetic genealogy enabled authorities to identify victims who had remained unknown for decades. These identifications did not alter the criminal case itself, but they transformed the historical record. Each restored identity represented more than a forensic achievement. It returned a name, a family history, and a personal story to someone who had long been listed only as an unidentified victim. These later identifications also illustrated an important principle within forensic science. Evidence collected carefully today may answer questions that current technology cannot yet resolve. Proper preservation of biological evidence, photographs, documentation, and investigative records allows future generations of scientists to apply methods that did not exist when an investigation first began. The case likewise influenced the way missing person investigations are approached. During the 1970s, communication between law enforcement agencies often depended on paper records, telephone calls, and regional coordination. Modern investigators have access to national databases, digital reporting systems, and significantly improved methods for comparing missing person reports with unidentified human remains. While no system is perfect, these developments have strengthened the ability of agencies to recognize patterns that might previously have remained hidden. Another enduring lesson concerns multidisciplinary cooperation. The successful resolution of the investigation required detectives, patrol officers, forensic pathologists, forensic odontologists, anthropologists, laboratory scientists, prosecutors, and victim support professionals to work together over an extended period. Each discipline contributed expertise that no single investigator could have provided alone. The case has also become an important subject of academic study. Universities, law schools, and criminal justice programs frequently examine the investigation to discuss investigative methodology, forensic evidence, courtroom procedure, and the application of the insanity defense. These discussions are intended not to sensationalize the crimes, but to better understand how criminal justice institutions respond to exceptionally complex investigations. At the same time, historians and victim advocates increasingly emphasize the importance of remembering the individuals whose lives were taken rather than allowing public attention to focus exclusively on the offender. Over the years, documentaries and historical research have increasingly included the perspectives of victims' relatives, investigators, and forensic specialists. This shift reflects a broader recognition that responsible historical storytelling should preserve the dignity of victims while presenting the evidence accurately. The investigation also demonstrates the value of persistence. Many important developments resulted not from dramatic breakthroughs, but from careful, methodical work, documenting witness statements, preserving evidence, reviewing records, and continuing to examine unresolved questions even years after the criminal trial had concluded. Such persistence remains a defining characteristic of successful cold case investigations today. Although the legal proceedings established responsibility for the crimes prosecuted in court, investigators have continued to distinguish carefully between verified evidence and speculation when discussing any additional possibilities. This distinction remains essential to responsible historical scholarship. Conclusions should rest upon documented evidence rather than assumption, ensuring that both the victims and the historical record are treated with accuracy and fairness. Today, the Gacy investigation is remembered not only as a major criminal case, but also as an example of how forensic science and investigative practice continue to evolve. Technologies unavailable in the late 20th century have provided answers that once appeared unattainable, reinforcing the importance of preserving evidence and maintaining detailed investigative records. For modern law enforcement, the case underscores several enduring principles. Respond promptly to missing person reports, share information across jurisdictions, preserve evidence with care, rely on corroborated facts, and continually reassess unresolved cases as new scientific methods become available. These principles extend far beyond any single investigation and continue to inform professional practice. For the families of victims, however, the significance of the case has always been more personal than institutional. Court decisions, scientific advances, and historical analysis cannot replace the lives that were lost. What they can provide is a more complete understanding of what happened, recognition of those affected, and an enduring commitment to ensuring that the victims are remembered as individuals rather than statistics. Ultimately, the lasting legacy of the Gacy investigation is found not in the notoriety of the offender, but in the determination of investigators, forensic scientists, prosecutors, and families who sought answers through evidence and lawful process. Their work has contributed to improvements in forensic identification, missing person investigations, and interagency cooperation that continue to benefit criminal justice today. The story therefore concludes not with the end of a trial, but with the continuing pursuit of truth. Each advancement in forensic science, each newly identified victim, and each lesson incorporated into modern investigative practice demonstrates that the impact of a criminal investigation can extend far beyond the courtroom. In that sense, the case remains historically significant because it helped shape the methods by which future investigations are conducted. Methods designed to identify victims more quickly, preserve evidence more effectively, and pursue justice with greater accuracy for generations to come.